England isn't the fairy tale you think it is. Behind the postcards and royal glam, there's a real England that hits hard, from London's hidden pressure to towns that look sweet but cost you more than money. In this countdown of 15 places, the deeper we go, the stranger it gets, and some truths might straight up ruin your expectations. Stay with me to the end, because number 1 is the one that makes most travelers go silent on day 1. Number 15. The truth about England that makes a lot of travelers wake up on day 1. A lot of people land in England with a ready-made picture in their head. Soft sunshine, postcard old streets, the warm smell of baked goods, everyone polite like it is straight out of a movie. But the moment you step out of a train station or the airport, the first reality check is almost boring in how simple it is. Real life here is not performing for anyone. England does not try to make you feel romantic. It runs on schedules, rules, and habits that have been shaped for centuries. The second shock is the weather. Not because it is bad, but because it forces your plans to loosen up. In one day, you can get sun, rain, and a gray, foggy mood back to back. Locals do not complain much. They just throw on another layer and keep moving. There is a very English kind of realism in that. Do not wait for perfect conditions. Learn how to move with whatever shows up. Then there is the whole thing about distance. English people are friendly, but they are rarely all over you. Politeness here is almost a social law. People queue, they respect personal space, and sorry comes out like a reflex. A lot of travelers mistake that for being cold. Locals see it as respect and self-control. You can get a warm hello and still feel a clear boundary that does not get crossed. Another moment of surprise comes from how the old and the new sit side by side. Next to an ancient church, you might see a cafe packed with people working on laptops. Under the shadow of a castle, you have trains running on a timetable. England is not living in the past. It is living with it. That parallel world can catch you off guard. Old does not mean slow, and modern does not mean rootless. And in the end, that so-called reality check can actually be a gift. Once the fantasy drops, you start seeing a real England. Less pink, but more layered. A place where the value is in small things. A pub where the regulars sit in the same spot like it is sacred. A park opening up in the middle of the city. A train that carries you out of the urban rush and into countryside with thin morning mist. Number 14. London looks glamorous. But what sits underneath is the real shock. In your imagination, London is pure symbol. Big Ben, palaces, bridges, the River Thames. But the shock of London is not how pretty it is. It is the invisible foundation that makes the city feel heavy. Power history, waves of immigration, and a pace that can swallow the romance whole if you came here just to collect photos. You quickly realize London is not one city. It is multiple worlds stacked right next to each other. Just a few tube stops and the vibe flips completely. From a strict finance district to a street market thick with spices. From classic museums to modern galleries. Locals are so used to this mix that they do not treat it as tourist stuff. This is simply how the city is built. London is shaped by migration and trade, and it is proud of that. The second shock is how intensely the place operates. London runs on time, on systems, on a massive urban logic. The underground is not just transportation, it is the city's bloodstream, an invisible map that teaches you how to think and move. Londoners might not hold eye contact long, but they will give directions fast and accurately because time is treated like something everyone shares and should respect. If you want to see what is underneath, step into the spaces that tell stories of power and order. The Tower of London carries the memory of prisons, treasure, and betrayal. Westminster feels like a reminder that the state is not only architecture, it is ritual. For locals, those places are not just history. They are proof that London was once the center of an empire, and its shadow still shows up in how the city presents itself. But underneath London, there is also urban loneliness. A city so crowded you can still feel completely alone. You sit in a cafe, hearing a dozen languages, watching everyone rush, and it hits you. London gives you chances, but it does not promise comfort. It is like a huge stage where everyone has to learn their role, or they risk disappearing into the crowd. Number 13. A completely different England, and the deeper you go, the stranger it feels. Once you leave London, England opens up like a book that suddenly changes its voice. The strange part here is not weird for shock value. It is the feeling that everything runs by its own rules. Villages have their own rhythm, towns have their own habits. Each region has a personality that does not blend easily. You start to see that the English countryside is not just scenery, it is shared memory. Hedgerows cut across fields like lines on a palm, drawn by history. Footpaths that cross farmland have existed long before you arrived. Locals see this as normal. Travelers see it like a painting. That gap in perception is where the strangeness begins. The deeper you go, the more you find towns where tradition is not put on as a show. Local festivals, farmers' markets, afternoon tea are not always tourism products. They are habits. Belief and folklore work the same way. A gray stone church in the middle of a village is not only a photo spot. It is where the community gathered, celebrated, mourned, and marked life's big moments. Some places still hold small local legends too. Stories about an old well, a giant oak, or a road that people keep telling as part of an emotional map. Another layer of strange is class and land history. You walk past a manor, a castle, then a small stone house, all close together. English people do not always talk loudly about it, but it shows in how they read space. Who belongs where, who is local, who is new. For a traveler, noticing this layer helps the trip go beyond surface beauty. And maybe the strangest thing is how quiet the culture can be. Patience in queues, restraint in conversation, respect for rules. It does not feel friendly in a tropical way, but it feels safe and orderly. The deeper you go, the less you chase check-in moments, and the more you start looking for the personality of a place. Number 12. Towns that look like fairy tales, and the price that gives you chills. Old English towns are often beautiful in a way that feels effortless. Honey-colored stone, steep roofs, tiny windows, climbing flowers on walls, like stepping into a storybook. But the price here is not some curse. It is the price of preserving beauty and living in a place that time keeps staring at. A lot of these towns have strict rules about architecture. You cannot casually change a door, repaint things however you want, or build something that breaks the look. Locals take pride in that. They live inside heritage. For newcomers, it can feel like a tie that pulls tight. Living in beauty means accepting limits. Beauty is no longer decoration, it becomes law. The second price is cost and tourism pressure. The more fairy tale a street looks, the higher the rent, the pricier the services, and the easier it is for everyday life to get pushed out. Many locals have a split feeling about tourism, grateful for the money, exhausted by the crowds in peak season. You will hear very real talk in a tea room. Summer is too packed, but winter gets so quiet it feels a little sad. That is the price of becoming an icon. The third price is being trapped inside a single story. When a place is famous for its beauty, it gets told and retold in one main narrative, while real life is always messier. Behind a window full of flowers might be a family stressing over heating bills. Behind a sweet-smelling bakery might be young people leaving because they cannot afford to stay. Fairy tales always have backstage. Travelers just do not often walk into it. But that is exactly why these towns stick with you. You realize lasting beauty is not automatic. It needs money, rules, and community agreement. When you slow down, beauty stops being something you just look at. It becomes something people have to protect. And protecting anything always comes with a cost. Number 11. York is not just old. Its history is darker than you expect. York looks like a carefully preserved medieval picture. City walls, cobbled streets, timber houses leaning over narrow lanes. But if you stand there a little longer, you feel that York's dark side is not cheap drama. It is the weight of memory, so thick the city almost feels like it is breathing history. In York, the past is not locked inside a museum. It sits right under your feet. York was a hotspot in multiple eras of power. The Romans came, the Vikings came, then medieval England built systems of rule and defense on top of what was already there. Locals do not tell this like a faraway legend. They talk about it like a real story they are proud to have carried through. You will hear them mention Jorvik, the Viking York, with a tone that feels casual, like describing an old neighbor. But York is also tied to the darker pages of European city history. Wars, disease, executions, and conflicts shaped by religion and identity. The walls are beautiful, but walls were also borders of fear. The romantic little alleys were once the kind of tight spaces where sickness could spread fast. Walking through the old areas, you can feel a heavy quiet, like the stones have listened to too many stories. What makes York special is how it turns rough history into a cultural experience with control. Ghost walks and haunted city storytelling are often done with a playful tone, but they still respect the reality behind the atmosphere. Locals see it in a practical way. It keeps tourism moving, and it reminds people that this city is not only pretty, it has been harsh. That contrast is why York stays in your mind. It is dreamy and heavy at the same time. York teaches a very English lesson. Beauty does not erase history, but it can live alongside it without denying it. When you leave York, you usually do not just carry pretty photos. You carry the feeling that you walked through a living chronicle. Number 10. Cambridge and Oxford look classy, but inside it is a tough game. Cambridge and Oxford are often described with words that sound almost magical. Spires, green lawns, ancient libraries, students in gowns. But if you look closer, the real pull is a tough game where reputation is built on discipline, tradition, and invisible pressure. The classy look is just the easiest layer to see. For locals, especially people who studied there or lived around the colleges, these cities are not just universities, they are ecosystems. Cafes, bookstores, chapels, dorms, student clubs, everything moves to its own rhythm. Even people who never studied there still get pulled into the orbit because the city is shaped by terms, exam seasons, graduations, and rituals that repeat every year. The first tough part is the standard. People get used to being the best inside a group where everyone is already top tier. Some traditions that seem romantic from the outside are actually tools that build identity and pressure. Like, you have to earn the right to belong. Locals sometimes joke the city is beautiful and exhausting at the same time. You sit in an old library feeling inspired, then suddenly feel small under the weight of knowledge and expectation. The second part is a softer kind of hierarchy. Not loud discrimination, but networks, clubs, and internal traditions. For visitors, that can feel intriguingly mysterious. For people inside, it can feel like a system where opportunities flow through rules that are not always spoken out loud. That is why Cambridge and Oxford can create a feeling of admiration mixed with caution. Still, what makes them truly special is how they turn knowledge into living culture. You might catch a debate, a church concert, a small exhibition, and see that learning is not trapped in classrooms. When you leave, what stays is not only architecture, but the sense of an England that treats intellect as part of its identity, even if the cost is being demanding. Number 9. The Lake District is breathtaking, but it is also the easiest place in England to get lost. The Lake District has a kind of beauty that feels like a classic landscape painting. Mirror still lakes, green hills, gray peaks, low clouds. But getting lost here is not just about directions. It is the feeling that nature pulls you out of city rhythm and you suddenly forget what you were rushing for. The Lake District makes you lost in the emotional sense. Locals see this region as part of national identity. They are proud of the scenery, the walking paths, the conservation rules, and the culture of living close to nature. You will notice small inns, quiet cafes, stone walls lining trails. Everything whispers the same message. Slowness here is a choice, not a lack of development. Folklore and belief in the Lake District is not flashy, but it exists. England has a habit of attaching story to landscape. A hill can come with a local legend. A deep lake can carry half-joking, half-serious tales. The key is how it is told. People do not claim magic as fact. They tell it as community memory, a way to keep the bond between people and place alive. The easy-to-get-lost part also comes from terrain and weather. You can start a hike under a bright sky and finish in thick mist. Locals talk a lot about respecting nature, not because they are scared of it, but because they understand it. There is an unwritten ethic here. Prepare before you go out. Know your limits. Do not treat the landscape like a prop for your photos. What makes the Lake District unforgettable is how it changes your standard of beauty. In a city, beauty is designed. Here, beauty is natural and cannot be controlled. When you leave, you might not remember every lake name or peak name, but you remember the feeling of truly breathing deep. It is the kind of getting lost that makes people want to come back. Number 8. Cotswolds, countryside heaven, or a trap that makes you spend without noticing. Cotswolds often shows up as the perfect English countryside image. Honeystone cottages, flower gardens, winding roads over rolling hills, little tea rooms. It is so beautiful you can forget this is also a very smart tourism economy. The trap is not a scam. It is the way everything is set up, so you always want to stay just a bit longer, and every bit longer comes with a price tag. Locals have two ways of looking at it. On one hand, they are proud their region is protected and loved. On the other hand, they know exactly how tourism changes life. Some villages are peaceful in the low season but overloaded on weekends. Some people enjoy the business boom, others feel tired because their home turns into a backdrop. You can feel it in the rhythm, busy in the day, quiet at night, like Cotswolds has two parallel lives. The culture here is rooted in rural history, especially sheep farming and the wool trade. Those beautiful stone houses did not appear by accident. They are traces of wealth from the wool boom, when some communities grew rich through commerce. That story makes Cotswolds more than pretty. It becomes a chapter about how the countryside once connected directly to national prosperity. The spending happens through refined experiences. Afternoon tea, a night in a cozy inn, handmade crafts, garden visits, it is all packaged like a lifestyle. You are paying not only for a product, but for the feeling of, I am living the English countryside. For locals, that can feel both prideful and risky, because if everything becomes sellable experience, real everyday life can start to thin out. What makes Cotswolds special is how it teaches you to love small scale. No grand monuments needed. A lane, a stone wall, a field can become a memory. And if you look past the fairy tale surface, Cotswolds starts telling a very English story about preservation, commerce, and the challenge of keeping a place's soul when everyone wants to take a piece of it home. Number 7. Liverpool, city of legends, and the shadows people rarely talk about. Liverpool is famous for music, docks, football, and a very distinct city spirit. But if you only see it as the home of legends, you miss the deeper layer. Liverpool is shaped by the sea, by trade, and by historical scars that still sit quietly in the city's collective memory. Passed through, creating wealth, but also passed through, creating wealth, but also linking the port region to painful chapters of maritime trade history, including the slave trade routes of the past. Today, the city does not completely avoid that story, but it is not always said out loud either. It remains like a shadow that museums and historians keep trying to place correctly. Liverpool's modern darkness is not sensational danger. It is the aftermath of industrial change. As port and industrial economies shifted, the city went through hard periods, job loss, and rebuilding. Liverpudlians tend to speak straight, joke hard, sometimes with sharp sarcasm, almost like a survival tool. You will hear a lot of humor, but inside that humor is memory of times that were not easy. On the folklore level, Liverpool has strong community energy. In pubs or on the street, people often talk more easily than in London. It is a port city openness, friendly, a little rough around the edges in a charming way. That surprises visitors, because Liverpool carries history but still feels very alive and everyday. Liverpool's special value is honesty. It is not polished evenly. Some places feel freshly renewed, others still feel raw, and that imperfection makes it human. Liverpool shows you that legend is not built only under stage lights. It is also built through resilience, through getting back up after the world changes around you. Number 6. Manchester, where modern England shows its true face after just one night. Manchester is the kind of city where one night is enough to feel how powerful modern England can be. Industry once shaped an entire era here, and the echo still lives in how people work, play, and define themselves. Manchester does not try to be a fairy tale. Manchester is energy. Locals often take pride in a spirit of hard work and creativity. You can see it in the blend of old and new architecture, in the music spaces, in how the city keeps rebuilding itself. Manchester was a symbol of the Industrial Revolution, and what shows up here is a very English character. Practical, disciplined, but always able to turn everyday life into culture. A night in Manchester can reveal two opposite layers. First, the loud one. Busy streets, bars, clubs, music. Then the quiet one. You walk past old brick buildings, warehouses turned into art spaces, and it feels like the city is saying, we used to make wealth with machines, now we make identity with ideas. Locals feel proud of that shift, but also cautious, because regeneration often brings rising prices and communities changing shape. Manchester has its own modern folklore too. Not ancient legends, but legends of music, football, and neighborhoods with strong character. People belong to a club, to a district, to family history tied to factories and workshops. That creates a powerful shared soul, and visitors can get swept into it quickly. Manchester's special value is that it proves England is not only castles and tea. England is also urban rhythm, working-class confidence, pop culture, and fierce competition wrapped in ambition. Manchester wakes you up in the best way. You see an England that is alive, shifting, and not waiting for anyone. Number 5. Birmingham, why people call it the most misunderstood city in England. Birmingham is rarely the first name on a travel list, and that is exactly how the misunderstanding is born. Many people assume Birmingham is just an industrial city with no distinct beauty. But Birmingham is like a quiet person. You have to stay a little longer to hear the real story, a hub of work, creativity, multicultural life, and constant reinvention. Locals often talk about Birmingham in a very grounded way. They are not trying to sell romance. They describe it as a place to build a life, to study, to work, to raise a family, especially for immigrant communities who made this city home. And if you pay attention, you will notice a very English kind of urban culture here. Pride is not built on scenery, but on how well a city functions and produces. Historically, Birmingham is tied to manufacturing, engineering, and skilled hands that made things for the whole country. Birmingham's diversity is also often misunderstood. Outsiders may think it makes the city less English. Locals see it as Birmingham's truth. Different communities bring food, faith, festivals, and turn the city into a living map. Walk a few streets and the accents shift, the smells shift, the daily rhythm shifts. It is not a loss of roots. It is a modern England where identity expands. What makes Birmingham memorable is how it rebuilds without hiding its industrial traces. You will see new structures, major libraries, public spaces, and museums that tell working history. The city does not pretend its past was glamorous. It uses that past as a base to grow into a new image. Birmingham's special value is that it teaches you to travel with fairness. Not every place looks good on a postcard, but some places matter because they tell the truth about how a country actually lives. Birmingham is one of those places. A city that helps you understand England is not just symbols, it is people, communities, work, and change. Number 4. Bath is elegantly beautiful, but one thing about it gives people goosebumps. Bath is beautiful in a controlled way. Pale stone streets, smooth curves of architecture, a feeling like the whole city was measured and built with taste. But the goosebumps do not come from fear. They come from how thick time feels here. Bath makes you realize something simple and strange. Humans have been chasing warm water, healing, and bathing rituals for a very long time, and that habit still leaves fingerprints all over the city. The deepest cultural layer of Bath is the story of water. Since Roman times, the hot springs turned this place into a center for wellness and gathering. Locals see the Roman baths not only as ruins, but as the core of the city's identity. You walk past old stone steps, watch steam rising, and feel a thread connecting modern life to something primal. People want warmth, cleanliness, calm. Bath also carries the Georgian spirit of England, when beauty was tied to class, ritual, and society. Places like the Royal Crescent suggest a world where architecture was a statement of order and status. Locals feel both pride and the heavy responsibility of preserving it. Visitors feel a kind of beauty that makes you quiet because it is almost too perfectly balanced. The goosebumps can also come from the contrast. Bath looks peaceful, yet it holds history of illness, treatments, and gentle old beliefs. People once believed the hot water could heal almost anything. Stories spread about the spring's power. Today, the city tells those stories as culture, without claiming mystery as fact, but it still keeps that soft, strange feeling, like you are standing in front of something that is both scientific and mythic. Bath's special value is refinement. It does not hit you with spectacle. It seeps into you through slow rhythm, disciplined architecture, and the long memory of warm water as healing. When you leave, what you carry is a sense of classic elegance, where wellness is not a slogan, it is history. Number 3. Stonehenge. The most unbelievable thing is not written in any book. Stonehenge is usually introduced with facts, ancient dates, massive stones, mystery about its purpose. But the most unbelievable part is not the numbers, it is standing there and realizing people from a distant time had the organization, belief, and will to build something that did not directly serve immediate survival. Stonehenge feels like a question placed in the middle of open land. Locals and heritage workers often talk about Stonehenge carefully. They do not push one single answer. They mention theories, astronomy, ritual, a gathering place, even ideas connected to healing. The unbelievable part is that the lack of certainty becomes the attraction. Stonehenge reminds you that the ancient world gets more complex the more you study it. In folklore, Stonehenge is wrapped in layers of imagination, some connected to wizards, some to giants, some to energy gates. What matters is how modern society handles those stories. They are allowed to exist as cultural texture, but there is still a line between exploration and superstition. Visitors can feel the mystery without being dragged into extremes. Stonehenge's special value is how it forces you to rethink meaning. Whatever the true purpose was, a community believed arranging stones in a circle mattered. That belief was strong enough to mobilize labor, planning, and skill. Standing there, you feel small not only next to the stones, but next to human ability to create symbols. When you leave Stonehenge, you do not carry a neat answer. You carry a feeling of a distant civilization that was still deeply human. That is the most unbelievable thing. After thousands of years, what remains is not only stone, but a living question about belief and purpose. Number 2. Brighton looks chill, but the real experience still surprises you. Brighton has an easy first impression. Sea wind, a promenade, the pier, cafes, small streets full of handmade shops. From a distance, it feels like a place to breathe. But the surprise comes when you realize it is both a seaside getaway and a bold cultural space in a very English way. A city where people give themselves permission to be a little different. Locals often see Brighton as a place where you get to live honestly. The atmosphere is open, the art scene is active, style and lifestyle are diverse. For visitors, it feels friendly and colorful. But the real surprise is that Brighton is not only fun. It has historical and social depth, from the Regency era and the Royal Pavilion to its rise as a key spot in British popular culture. Brighton's architecture tells that story too. The Royal Pavilion is a genuine oddball, completely different from the classic England image. It feels like a reminder that England has always had moments of experimentation, periods when taste jumped outside the usual frame. Locals talk about the pavilion with pride and a bit of humor, like saying, "This city has always been slightly unusual, and we like it that way." Brighton's folklore is not ancient legend, it is seaside legend. Stories of summer, youth, long nights, and freedom. When the sun goes down, Brighton shifts from chill to electric. You can feel the contrast. Daytime is families and travelers. Nighttime is music, bars, and a different rhythm of life. Locals accept both faces as part of the same city. Brighton's special value is that it teaches you the English. Seaside is not tropical. The water is colder, the wind is sharper, but in return, you get a more grown-up kind of romance. Sitting by the waves with something warm to drink, hearing the roller coaster on the pier, you feel like you are in a place that is resting and living at the same time. Brighton surprises you not just because it is lively, but because it has character. Number 1. 15 places worth visiting in England. The more you watch, the more you want to pack and go. If you gather the feeling from a journey through all these cities and landscapes, England shows up as a country of layers, where each destination carries a different kind of personality. London is power and global flow. York is thick memory and sometimes darkness. Cambridge and Oxford are disciplined intellect. The Lake District is nature that pulls you out of hurry. Cotswolds is countryside beauty that is not naive. Liverpool is port city resilience. Manchester is modern energy. Birmingham is everyday truth. Bath is healing and aesthetic order. Stonehenge is an ancient question. Brighton is freedom by the sea. Locals in each place hold their stories with a different kind of pride. Some pride comes from royal heritage, some from labor, some from community spirit, some from landscape. When you place them side by side, you understand why England stays compelling. It is not a single image. It is multiple versions of Englishness living together. The most memorable part of this list is not how many photos you take. It is how you learn to read a country through ordinary details. A patient queue. A pub where people speak softly. A train cutting through fields. A small church in a village. A windy, chilly coastline. Those moments create a living national portrait, not a textbook one. And if there is one reason people feel like grabbing a suitcase right away, it is because England gives you a journey with rhythm. You can start with big symbols, then drift into smaller, quieter, deeper places. Each step makes you chase glamour less and curiosity more. Curiosity about people, culture, memory, and the way a country keeps its past inside the present. So that's our countdown of 15 truths and 15 places across England, and the deeper we went, the more you realized England isn't just beautiful, it's layered and full of surprises. If this journey helped you see the real England a little more clearly, hit like to support the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next documentaries and travel deep dives into places people rarely talk about. And if you've been to England before, drop a comment with your real experience. I'd love to read it and pin the best stories.